Welcome to the next episode of Crashin the Boards. I'm Joe Sudbeck.
I'm Jack Krenicky.
And again, this is episode 2 of being at home. It's definitely gotten a lot easier this time going around than the first time. And this time there's a lot of news in the NBA at least, and college obviously with March Madness being canceled. We went over that last episode, but local news, a lot of it with Creighton getting transfers, losing guys to the draft and transfers. Well, the biggest one definitely is Tyshawn Alexander. What do you think of his leaving Creighton? I was completely shocked that he left.
I was shocked too because honestly, if you just look at his stats, not that good. Just they won't blow scouts away. They won't make him get drafted for sure. Because I don't think he even get drafted in the mock draft. But just like but if you look at what Creighton has next year, they had all their starting five are coming back. They were ranked in the top 5 preseason, and they had a chance to make a run at the March Madness later in that year. So declaring for the draft, that just blows my mind. Why you do that? I mean, I guess he's banking on the fact that he's going to get drafted and then he'll be able to make more money. But other than that, I don't see why.
I mean, looking at like Justin Patton, I get him leaving. I mean, he was a first round pick, and even Kyrie. I mean, I'm looking at the one thing I'll say is scouts are going to probably, to me, I would compare Tyshawn or any Creighton player to players that played at Creighton before him under Greg, because it's a lot. You're going to see how as a coach Greg does with these players and kind of compare how they played. Well, Tyshawn's comparison, especially after this year, would be Kyrie Thomas. I mean, Tyshawn was a lockdown defender this year, and he kind of showed that comparison. I mean, Tyshawn's 6'4", Kyrie's 6'3". Tyshawn, though, has averaged more points across the board than Kyrie did in his junior season after he left. Tyshawn averaged 16.9, Kyrie averaged 15.1. But the difference between the two, and the reason why Kyrie got drafted early in the second round, I think it was 8th in the second round, the 8th pick in the second round, was the difference in efficiency, the way he scored. Kyrie was he scored he was 41% from 3 and 54% from the field on 8 shots. Tyshawn averaged 1 to 2 more points, so we'll round it up at 16.9, so 2 more points at 17, took 2 more shots, shot 43% from the field and 39% from 3. So the scoring numbers, he's scoring 2 more points, but not at an efficient rate. And they're going to look to have him probably be a 3-and-D guy. Well, one thing that Kyrie Thomas had going for him to be a 3-and-D guy, he was a 2-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year in the 3 years he was at Creighton. He won it twice in a row. He was also all Big East. He was also all Big East like Tyshawn was his last year, but he's scoring efficiently and is a great defender. Scouts are all over 3-and-D guys now, and he was the perfect 3-and-D guy. Tyshawn can probably score a little bit better, but he can't do it as efficient, and he's not as good of a defender as Kyrie was. So I think he's just making the wrong move. They had him in mock drafts earlier, but then I saw one like thing online that said that he was, after he declared, he wasn't in the draft. Like he wasn't in the next mock draft that person had. And what if there's no combine? I mean,
that's gonna.
You don't have It's just like they had no combine this year for the NFL. Some guys that are like later in the draft that are borderline getting drafted or not, or borderline moving up to a first, second round pick, they can't do it because they don't have that combine. They can't go in person to see him. So the draft stock is not going to improve very much, at least drastically, because you can't see the combine. So I think that's going to hurt him. I think he might get drafted, or he might be an undrafted free agent, but I just think it was across the board the wrong move for him to leave.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
And the next one, we'll cover Davion after this, but we'll go with Alex O'Connell, the transfer from Duke, coming into Creighton. What are your initial thoughts?
I think that's a great move for Creighton, and I think I watched a little bit of Duke last year, and Alex O'Connell was solid 3-point shooter, and he could, his passing skills were really good from what the I saw. I think he'll bring a lot to the table for Creighton, and I think he'll be able to spread the ball around to Mitch, to Marcus, all those guys, and then I think he'll just make the Creighton just overall better, in my opinion.
Now, I don't think he can play this year. I think he has to wait a year. I think since he's not a grad transfer, I think he's transferring in. So I think he has to sit out 1 year. If he does sit out 1 year, which I'm pretty sure he has to, I don't think he's going to look like a Creighton player that I am not the biggest fan of, but he was there when they had the rebuilding year in 14-15, which will kind of be what O'Connell's going to have to be there for, because more than likely if Marcus leaves after his junior season, which he could if he's that good, I think he's going to end up being like a Ricky Krecklow. I don't know if you know him, but he was like this kind of guard forward that they had after they had the Doug year. They had I think it was after the Doug year that they had a really bad season. I know they went like 14-19 that year, so it was like one of the only losing seasons under Greg. And he was this like senior transfer from Cal who was pretty good, but he was more of he was an experienced guy. And if Alex O'Connell played this year with the team they have, with Mitch, like you said, Marcus, I think he'd be perfect because I don't think he's that great of a good scorer, but what I think he can be is a guy that's played in big games at Duke. I mean, if Coach K's recruiting him, he's good enough to play college.
If Coach K's playing in minutes, then yeah, he's kind of good.
Yeah, and I think that him on a team that hasn't really won yet. I mean, they've won games, but they haven't won big games. The only big game they won was Seton Hall, but they haven't won a Big East tournament. They haven't made it far in the NCAA. A guy like him in the locker room and on the court to kind of just keep everybody in the game and keep their head right late down the stretch, playing in big games that he has, I think he'd be a perfect guy for this year. But if he has to wait a year and he has to sit out, he's going to really have to be used as a guy that can just get the young players to be more, just be better. And he can be like Ricky Krecklow in that way, but it would stink to have him have to sit out a year when it just doesn't suit what they need him for, which is this year. They need him to play this year to kind of glue this team together, to give them like a senior leader that can help them down the stretch of a game by basically being a coach on the floor in that scenario. Now, one of their big transfers, except he didn't come into Creighton, he left Creighton, was Davion Mintz. I didn't like him just because Greg, I think, played him at the wrong position. I think we did that last episode. At the tail end of the episode, we talked about him transferring. But I was just shocked that he went to Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky. If he wasn't getting minutes at Creighton, I don't think he'd get minutes at Kentucky.
Well, I mean, he started. I mean, he started in the last 2 seasons, but I mean, usually when somebody transfers from that type of school, they're not going to a school that's better after they transfer from a school that they were, decent at, but they weren't amazing. And he transfers to a school that's just way better at just as a program, and I think that's just wild.
Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking. What was going through his mind, I don't know.
I mean, Calipari, I don't know, he must want just seniors on the team because obviously he gets a lot of freshmen. So he must just want some seniors that can help him out.
Yeah, Kentucky's recruiting class this year is pretty good, I heard.
Yeah, I mean, just the way Calipari recruits, they're gonna be good, and I think Davion could help them, but I don't know. It's just pretty interesting to me to have a guy like Davion on a team to try to win down the stretch with a young team. I don't think he's that good. I'm honestly interested to see what position they play him at. I think he's a 2 guard, but he played 1 at Creighton, and I wonder what Calipari's going to think. Would play him 1, 2. But I think that the guy that needs to step up, he has to sit out the first semester, I know, of this next year for Creighton, is Antoine Jones. He transferred from Memphis. He's kind of like O'Connell was. He averaged 5 points a game, on decent efficiency, but played a decent amount of 2, but he's an athletic guard, wing, that I think if he can help them on offense, get some points. Because I have a guy that I think needs to be the key on defense. Since Tyshawn was the guy that he was the guy that was guarding the other team's best player. I think Damian Jefferson needs to be the guy that guards the next best player in the other team. I mean, he's 6'6", he's long, he can defend. I think that he's the guy that needs to step up next year. Who do you think needs to step up next year for Creighton to fill Tyshawn's role?
To fill Tyshawn's role, I would say that Sharif Mitchell needs to try to fill in those shoes, because this year Sharif came in off the bench and he was just like the energy guy. He was the spark plug. He was locked in on defense, and he was like a great. He'd make a couple plays that would just swing the whole momentum of the game. So I think if he can come in and do that, like with getting more minutes, I think that would benefit Creighton pretty well. And then they could use other players to do other things. But I think Sharif is going to have a big year this year.
I completely forgot about Sharif Mitchell. I think that's a huge one to have him come off the bench, or maybe even start now that Tyshawn's gone, and be the defender. And that's, I mean, he was a good defender last year, and maybe with the bigger role, maybe with an opportunity to start, he could be, I completely forgot about him, he could be a huge part next year of getting that defense to where it needs to be. And what I was going to say with Denzel Mahoney entered the draft, he seems more like he's going to stay to me, and he's just kind of doing it to test the waters, which I think is good. If you're a player that, no matter what, if you just go in the draft, enter the draft, it can't hurt you if you come back. It really doesn't. And I think that that's what, I think I wouldn't, if I were Marcus Zagorowski, I think I would have done it. And just to kind of, test your waters. If they say, hey, you should stay one more year or 2 more years, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Because it's not going to hurt you if you do. It's not going to hurt you if you don't. But I think it's just better if you do. And a guy that...
It can only benefit you, because your stock would only go up.
Exactly.
Unless you completely bomb the year, which I don't think you'll do.
And another thing I think that another mistake about Tyshawn leaving is when you're on a better team, when your team is just better and you're getting more, that's when you get more attention. When you're making runs, that's when you're going to get more attention. And I think with the team, you're coming back to it. Some teams have them top 2, like number 1, number 2 in the country. At least top 5 probably in preseason, maybe even top at the lowest top 10 in the country at the start of the season. And you're playing at Kansas next year too. You're playing in Atlantis. You're playing a schedule that is top of the line in the country. What did you say? I didn't hear you.
You're going to be nationally televised games where everyone's going to be able to see you.
Exactly. When you're playing top tier games in a top tier schedule, you need to you come back. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You might have bad games against some of them, but if you're a good enough player to get drafted, be a top 60 NBA player, you should be wanting to play the other best players. If you have a good game against them, your draft stock's going to rise, and if they make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, win the Big East, your stock's just going to grow. So I think it's just a mistake to leave when you're leaving a team that's going to be better next year, and you're probably going to get a higher draft stock. I mean, the reason why Justin Patton got drafted was if that team wasn't good, he wouldn't have got as many looks. And if that shows his NBA career isn't the best, and a lot of his success in college was because of Maurice Watson. He set him up perfectly a lot of times. So I think when you're on better teams, it's just 100% proven you're going to get better. You're going to get more looks. And that's why I think he should have come back, played the season with a great team, and make a run. And at the same time, your draft stock's probably going to rise.
Yeah.
And I know if Denzel Mahoney leaves, though, that's going to be the killer for Tyshawn to fill Tyshawn's offense. Because he averaged, it was 16.7 points a game, I think is what Denzel Mahoney averaged, which is a ridiculous amount of points, especially coming off the bench. So it's just...
I have stats for that here, Joe. He averaged 12 points while shooting 36% from 3 and 42% from the field.
All right, so it was...
A steal and an assist again.
I went to one of the Creighton luncheons. I can't remember when it was, but they had it was when he played like his probably first 5-6 games, and he was averaging like 16.7 points a game or something, 14.7 I think is what it was. And it's like he's coming off the bench averaging double digits. You need that guy can fill Tyshawn's role if he was starting. So if he ends up staying in the draft, which if he stays in the draft, that is probably the worst decision he's ever made. I mean, he's not a top 60 pick. I mean, he had one good season, but I think he could have another good season next year. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this whole team and how this roster that we had said not too long ago is all returning, to see how many of them actually return next year.
Yeah.
And in the news in the NBA, they have some training practice facilities opening up May 1st. What are your thoughts on that correlating to the season?
I think that's a step in the right direction for getting the season back on track, because if they're already opening practice facilities, like, I think they're planning on having games and we're planning on having the playoffs if they're going to open up practice facilities in May, because if they weren't going to have it, if they were going to like continue the season, why would you open up the facilities like in May, not just for the safety of everyone else, just keep them closed, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I think it's great to open up the training facilities, and I think that if the season does come back, whether they play the regular season or just going to the playoffs, I think it's going to probably be one of the wildest playoffs ever.
Oh yeah.
With no fans and probably some.
Everyone's coming off with like a month rest.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more upsets.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think more upsets, and I think that's another thing that we were talking about too. With like, if they come back next year and there is no fans for, like, let's say next season in college basketball, college football, the teams that are going to dominate are the teams that are like the Alabamas, the Dukes, because if you don't have fans there and you're outmatched, that you can't change the tide of the game by having a loud crowd getting in, like, ahead of fans. Yes, exactly. So I think that it's going to be a killer. I think what would happen is next year there's just going to be more dominance by the higher level teams in any sport that has no fans, because it's just going to be easy to get on runs, and it's going to be harder for the losing team to stop the run without a home crowd.
Yeah.
So this was the latest episode of Crashin' the Boards. I'm Joe Sudbeck.
I'm Jack Pernicki.
And thank you for listening.